Hello and welcome to this World Cup edition of the Dream Team Professor podcast. In the last episode we focused on the rules and the strategy for the game, but in this one we're going to just focus on the best teams and the best players to target, and mostly looking at the teams that we expect to finish first and second in their groups. There are a few other gems out there, but most of the points we expect to come from the teams that are going to go the furthest in the competition. One thing to make you aware of before we get started, I am filming this and recording it from a hotel room, so the sound quality and the camera quality might not be as good as usual. So the fixtures aren't going to be in order of best to worst or anything like that, but I'm just going to cover the teams we expect to top the group and then come second. But we're going to start with Holland or the Netherlands, and they face Senegal, Ecuador and Qatar first. And the player that I've put down here that I think is probably one of the best options is obviously Memphis Depay, but at the moment he seems like he could potentially be injured, so I think we're going to have to wait for the starting lineups for this one. But he's had a good qualifying, got 12 goals in qualifying, and he's 5.5 million, so he could be quite a good slot to go alongside one of the two top premium strikers like a Harry Kane or a Messi. But we will need to wait for the starting lineups, I think, to see if he does start. In their last game they had Bergwijn and Hansen started, or Vincent Janssen, so I'm not too sure whether he's definitely going to start that first game, so we'll wait and see, but 5.5 million does seem like quite a good asset. Then in midfield you have Klaassen, who's a £3 million midfielder, and he seems to play in that sort of number 10 position behind the two strikers. He's got 4 goals in qualifying out of 10 appearances, and at only 3 million he looks like he could be quite a good enabler to fit in your midfield. So he's one to watch out for, but he looks like he's going to start. He's played quite a few of their previous games, so he's one that I'd definitely look to target and is a good option. And then Cody Gakpo, so from PSV, he's 4 million and a striker on the game, and he's got 9 goals and 12 assists from 14 games in the Dutch league, so he could be a good option in this one. The only thing is he didn't start that last game, but I do expect that he will start from coming into the tournament. One of the good things with Cody Gakpo, he looks like he can play sort of any of those 3 positions in the sort of striker role. He's played number 10 for them, or he's played as one of the 2 strikers. And then if you go on Who Scored, they've got like a predicted lineup of who they expect to start for that first Senegal game. And they've got him sort of playing as number 10 behind Janssen and Bergwijn. So he could be still a good option, whether or not he plays in that number 10 or the striker option. But he's got goals and assists in his game. So for the price, 4 mil, again, he could be another backup striker, or if you're playing 3 up front. Then looking at the defences, you've got Nathan Ake from Man City at 3.5 million, and he seems like he's going to be a starter going into this. Looking at their previous lineups, it looks like they play sort of Virgil van Dijk as the middle centre-back, then sort of Nathan Ake and Timber either side of him. But at 3.5 million, he looks like a good option, with Virgil being quite a bit more expensive. I do like Dumfries at 4.5. But he's had a slight injury doubt. He has travelled with him, and I think he put out a tweet to say his injury isn't a worry. But to start off with, I think I might go with Ake, keep a bit of budget behind, or potentially look to move to Dumfries once we know that he's definitely going to start. But at 3.5 million, I think Ake is very good value there. And again, with Who Scored, if it's coming up to the first game, you can actually have a look at the predicted lineup. It's not always 100% accurate, but it is worth checking out to see who the predicted lineup could be if you're not 100% sure how this team usually lines up. And then you can go and look at their previous couple. A lot of the teams are playing warm-up games at the moment, so that's always quite a good indicator. So that's Depay at striker, if he's fit. You've got Klaassen in midfield at 3 million, who gets goals and assists. You've got Gakpo, who'd be a good striking option if Depay isn't starting, or he could play in that sort of number 10 or winger role. And then I've got Nathan Ake at 3.5 as a starting defender in a group that looks pretty good, really. Senegal, Ecuador and Qatar. And then Dumfries, he's got the sort of assists and more attacking returns. But if he's not 100% fit, we might want to start with someone a bit more nailed. Then on to England, so we play Iran, the USA and Wales. And now the Who Scored, I've got the preview up here of the team that they're expecting to play that first game, which is Pickford, Maguire, Dyer, Stones, Shaw, Trippier, Rice, Bellingham, then Foden, Kane and Saka. Obviously this is who scored's predicted. I think it'll be something similar, but again, take it with a pinch of salt. We'll wait until the first lineups come out, but I think it's going to be relatively accurate, and there could be a bit of a change up between Foden, Saka and Sterling, and then potentially a change of shape, depending on how attacking we want to go. But it doesn't really affect the picks that I'm choosing here. So obviously I'm going to go with Harry Kane to start with. Most people would realise why. 7.5 million, but he's well worth it. I mean, he got the golden boot in the last World Cup, and he got 4 goals at the Euros as well. 12 goals from 7 in the qualifiers. So we expect that he's going to score. He's on penalties. By far England's best goal scorer, probably just a little bit ahead of Sterling, who does perform pretty well in these sort of tournaments, but I think he's going to be the key man. And with those sort of premium striker spots, you can rotate between the teams that are playing the best fixtures. So I think Kane's probably got a really good fixture here against Iran, and potentially the next two look good as well. But personally, I'm looking to rotate the strikers and target specific fixtures. But then I'll move on to Kieran Trippier. So he's 4.5 million, and I'm thinking that I'm going to put him in my my first team actually. We've seen on Dream Team this season that the Who Scored algorithm really rates him, and I think it's going to be fairly similar. He's on quite a lot of the set pieces. I imagine he's on free kicks and corners, and I expect him to start with quite a lot of injury problems at right wing back / right back. So I think he's probably the best option in that England defence at the minute. So he's probably going to be in my team. But then you might laugh at this next one. Harry Maguire. I'm tipping him, and I'm probably going to put him in my team. I know he's had a dodgy couple of, might have even been over a season that he's looked quite dodgy. But I still think the way he plays, he's really suited to England and international football. It's all a lot slower. He's less exposed. It's not as much of a high line, and he's a threat. He's a threat going forward from corners, set pieces. He is a threat, and Southgate loves him, and I expect him to start. Just having a look back as well. So he's had 4 goals from 6 qualifying games, qualifying for the World Cup, and then he had 1 goal at the last Euros. And on Who Scored as well, he's got a 7.6 average rating in the Euros and the World Cup qualifiers. So the algorithm loves him. Who Scored is still going to be doing the algorithm for the Sun Dream Team World Cup game. So personally, I still think he's going to be a really good pick for this. I don't really think that his lack of game time and poor form for Man United is really going to be that much of a big deal when it comes to playing Iran, USA and Wales. Possibly when it gets to, or if we get to the knockout stages, it might be a bit more exposing. But for these 3 games, I think he should be perfectly fine to include in your team. So 4 mil, I'm going to put him in, and I'm probably going to put Trippier in as well. I'll show you my team at the end, but I think he's a good option. Then I'm just going to mention these 3, Foden, Saka and Sterling. I do think all of them are really good options, but at the moment I just don't know which ones or which combo that Southgate's going to go with. I think personally I'd go with Sterling and Saka, but I think Foden's just done just as much enough to start this, and I do think Sterling's probably, for most fans, I think Sterling's probably been the weakest out of those 3 this season. But when it comes to Southgate, I think Sterling's one of the favourites for him. So yeah, I wouldn't surprise to see him start, and then it'd be a toss-up between Foden and Saka on that right-hand side. So for me, I think I'm going to just avoid those until I'm a bit more sure on what the starting lineup's going to be. Then on to Argentina, and I think these are going to be a really good team in this tournament. I read a stat that they're unbeaten in 36 games, and with Saudi Arabia, Mexico and Poland in their group, I don't think they're going to struggle in that group at all either. So that first game especially looks like one to target. I'm going to start off with a goalkeeper, and you've got Martinez in goal at 4 million, and I think he's a really good value pick actually. It was probably between him and Pickford for me, but at 4 million I think that just by being 0.5 cheaper, I think he just about looks more of a favourable option to me. And he's also got I know it depends on how the games go, but he's also a really good penalty stopper as well, so that comes into it too. Then the defence it's a bit more difficult. I've put Lisandro Martinez at 4 million, and I think I'm going to put him in my team anyway, but it's a bit debatable whether or not he is going to start, because they have got Romero from Spurs and also Otamendi, who are quite well picked for Argentina. So it's going to be quite hard to guess the lineup. Who Squad's probable lineup actually says Otamendi and Romero, but I had a look back at some of the previous games, and in the warm-up game they had recently, Lisandro Martinez did start with Otamendi, so I'm going to go with that, and I think I'm still going to include Martinez in my team. At Man United this season, he's got a 6.78 average rating, so he's still quite good on the Who Scored algorithm, and Argentina look quite strong in defence, so I'm going to tip him in defence. Then quite an obvious one with Messi at 7.5 million. He had 9 goal contributions in the Copa America and 7 in the World Cup qualifiers, and obviously we know what Messi can do. He seems like he plays like more of a number 10 or in the front two for Argentina, but wherever he plays, he's gonna get the assists and he's gonna get the goals. And I think similar to Harry Kane, I'm gonna probably start with 2 premiums at 7.5 and then swap them and target the teams that have got the best fixtures. And that Saudi Arabia game looks like a really good one to target. Then a slightly different pick up front. Obviously, if you don't go with Messi, you could also have Lautaro Martinez. He's only 5.5 million, so again he could be one of those slightly cheaper slots, but he's had 10 goal contributions in the World Cup qualifiers and he's still a really good striker, so he's potentially an option if you don't quite want to spend on Messi with 7.5 million. If you've taken anything useful from this video so far, please do hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. I'm going to be doing a lot more Sun Dream Team World Cup content throughout the tournament, and hopefully the quality will be a bit better because we won't be from a hotel room for those ones. But yeah, please do hit the like button and subscribe to the channel, and if you listen on Spotify as well, please do give us a follow on there. Then on to France, and they play against Australia, Denmark and Tunisia, so they've got a pretty good group, although Denmark, I was looking back at some of the fixtures and I think Denmark have beat France and then got a draw with them, so that's going to be quite a tough game for France, but the other 2 games look like ones we can target. I've actually put Benzema at 7 million as probably the best option. I know they have got Mbappe and Griezmann, who are also pretty good attacking assets, but I think Benzema probably is the best in my opinion, and is 0.5 cheaper than Mbappe. He got 4 goals in the last Euros, and actually Griezmann and Mbappe only got 1 sort of goal contribution each. Although I did put down in the qualifying they were a bit better. Mbappe, he got 6 goals and 1 assist, and Griezmann got 5 goals and 2 assists in the qualifying, but both of them were pretty quiet in the Nations League, although I'm not sure how seriously all teams take that one. I was looking at some of their lineups and they weren't always the strongest lineups they played for the Nations League, so yeah, it's quite a hard one, but having a look back, I think Benzema, in my opinion, looks like the best option. And then Who Scored have got the probable lineup as Mbappe and Benzema as the 2 strikers and Griezmann just behind. So if you do go with any of them 3, it's looking quite possible that they are all going to start. But yeah, in my opinion, Benzema the best option there. The others are good options as well, and I still would target that Australia game and Tunisia if you think Mbappe is going to do better. But for me, Benzema. Then I think onto the defence it gets a little bit harder. They've got really good options in that centre-back position, and I was looking back at previous lineups, and there's so much rotation. I did see that Saliba is actually the most owned defender currently from France in Dream Team, but I'm not convinced he starts. And actually, Who Scored on either in their probable lineup, they've got Konate and Varane as the 2 centre-backs. So I think if you're going to go for a defender, I think Pavard at 4.5 million seems like the safest pick at right back. He's one of the only ones that looks like he doesn't get rotated. They have put Hernandez down at left back, but again, there was a little bit of rotation with him as well. So overall, when it comes to France, I think I'm probably going to look to move to Benzema, when they've got the good fixtures. And then if I'm going to bring in the France defender, which I haven't got in my sort of first team that you're going to see in a bit later, but I'd probably look at bringing Pavard in from the start and then waiting to see if they settle on a back four or what their back line's going to look like. Then I'm going to go on to Germany, and I feel not too sure about how I feel about this team, and it's the same with Spain, where they've got quite a tough group where Spain and Germany are both playing each other. I think it's really quite off-putting with that game slapped right in the middle of the qualifying or the group stage. Sorry, but from that Germany side, I'm looking at it and I know it doesn't seem very glamorous, but I think Gundogan at 4.5 looks like the best option for me. He got 5 goals in qualifying, and he got 2 goals in the Nations League, and 7.8 rating in all the qualifying games overall. So quite a good average rating, and he looks like one of the most nailed players in that lineup. They had a warm-up game 2 days ago, and he started as sort of like in a midfield, not defensive 2, but 2 in front of the back 4. It was Goretzka and Gundogan. But I think we've seen enough with him at Man City that even if he does sort of play in that sort of deeper line midfield role, he can contribute with the goals and assists. So I think he's a pretty good option there if you're looking for someone that's sort of nailed for Germany. Then on to Kai Havertz, and he seems like he's a pretty good option, but at 5.5 I think he's quite expensive. He got 2 goals in the Euros, he's got 3 goals and 2 assists in qualifying, but I do think there are much better options at that price point, so he is probably one of the better options at Germany, but I think it's a little bit of an avoid for me at the minute. Potentially that Costa Rica game could be one to target once we know what their settled lineup's going to be. But again, that third fixture, it probably will be okay because Spain's in the group, so there'll be a lot to play for, but that third fixture you can get a lot of rotation. Looking around the rest of that Germany squad though, I'm struggling to find a defender that I want to include in my team. Looking through, you can go on Who Scored, or I use SofaScore as well. You can look through their previous lineups, and that defence is constantly changing. So at the moment, until I see what the lineups are, I'm not going to want to get a defender in. And then when it goes to the attackers as well, I think Havertz looks like the mainstay, but a lot of the time they are rotating again. Leroy Sané's in there quite regularly, but he's 6 million, which I think is far too much. You've got Gnabry at 5 million, but I think they probably will compete for spots in some of these games. So I think Gnabry's probably a bit better at a budget pick, but both have got good goals and assist potential. But yeah, I'm not completely sure that 6 million for a Germany striker or / winger is that good when you could sort of pay 7 and get Benzema, for example. So for me, Germany are going to be one of these teams where I'll wait and see what sort of lineup they settle on, and then maybe try and target that Costa Rica game. But I'm not convinced, because with Spain in that group, they're going to be really quite tightly contesting that first and second position. So for me, it's just an avoid. So seeing as we've done Germany, we'll move on to Spain because they're in the same group. So they face Costa Rica first, which is a really good game. But again, there's so much rotation that goes on in this Spain squad that I'm a bit glad the game comes a little bit later, because we can have a look at the lineups and potentially move to one of their players. But looking at the lineups and the previous fixtures, there is a lot of rotation, both in defence and in the front three. Morata, he's looking like sort of one of their better options, and when they played their last competitive game against Portugal, they had Morata as the striker, Ferran Torres on the right wing, and Sarabia on the left wing. But then they played a warm-up game 2 days ago, I think it was, and they played Ansu Fati on the left wing, and Asensio as the striker, and Sarabia on the right wing. So again, it's really hard to choose. But that Sarabia does look like he's fairly popular with the manager, and he's only 3.5 million. So if he is starting, he could be a good budget pick. He plays either on the left or on the right, so he's a good one. But actually, I think Ferran Torres is a slightly better option. He's 4.5, so an extra million, but he's got 13 goals in 30 appearances for Spain. So I think he's more of a goal threat than Sarabia, definitely. And then looking at defence, I think that's probably the most settled with, you've got Torres, Laporte, Alba and Carvajal look like the best options, but they're all 4 million, so there's not much between them. But potentially, I think Alba's probably got the most attacking threat or gets forward the most out of those. So if you're going to choose one of the defenders, it probably will be Alba. But for me, again, it's a similar situation to Germany. You might want to go with them for the first game against Costa Rica, but then if you've got defenders, I'm not sure about that Germany game. Both teams are quite strong. And then Japan, I think that's going to be a tougher game than it looks on paper as well. So yeah, for me, I think I'm going to stick with the teams like England, Holland, and potentially France before I go with Spain or Germany. Now next I'm going to come to Croatia, and I actually think these guys have a potential to win this group. They're in the same group as Belgium, so it's going to be tough, but then Morocco and Canada are the other fixtures. So Morocco first, Canada, and then Belgium last. And I think Ivan Perisic is a really good option. He's 4 million, so it feels a little bit expensive, but he's had such a good season with Spurs with 7 assists. And then in this Croatia team, he plays a much more advanced role. Probably on the left wing, I think it's going to be. Who scored have him down as being a left winger in their probable lineup, but I think he can play on the right as well. But at 4 million, I think he could chip in, especially against Morocco and Canada. I think he's got good assist potential and even quite a good goal threat. I'm not 100% sure about Croatia, but he's taken a lot of corners for Spurs, so I think there's a potential that he could take them there. But then for just 0.5 million more, you could get yourself Modric, and he's their penalty taker, and he got 3 goals in the qualifiers, and he got 3 goals also in the Euros that's just gone. So you could go 0.5 more and get Modric, and then get a penalty taker in your squad, which could be really valuable. So it's a bit of a toss up between those two, but both are good options. And then just as more of a budget pick, I've highlighted his name's Gvardiol, and he's 2.5 million and a defender. But I had a look through their previous lineups and the games they've played results, and he seems like he's their most nailed centre back, and he's only 2.5 million, which is quite a lot cheaper than a lot of the options. And if you're looking for someone just to get you through the group stages, I think that Morocco game and Canada game could have quite a good clean sheet potential for him as a budget pick. Croatia never seemed like a really glamorous team, but they always seem to do fairly well in this like knockout competition football. They're always quite a hard team to break down, especially when England have played them as well previously. They always give us a tough game. So yeah, I think that Perisic, Modric, or Gvardiol for in the defence as a budget pick could be all good options. Then we go on to Belgium, who are in the same group as Croatia, but they start against Canada, then play Morocco, and then finish up with Croatia. One thing to highlight in this one is I had a look, and Lukaku had an injury and hasn't returned to full training yet, but they expect him to play some part. So I'd completely write off Lukaku definitely until you see the squads. I was looking at this Belgium's lineup actually, and I was quite underwhelmed, to be honest. There was a time where they were looking like a really good option in tournament football, but now it's looking like they might have got a bit past their peak. You have Eden Hazard there at 4 million, who at 4 million that seems a bit of a steal initially, but actually just isn't that Eden Hazard that we remember. So he's just 4 million, but he's only played 3 games this season and started 1 in La Liga. So any of his old form that we do remember, it's probably unlikely that he is going to repeat any of that. But still, we do know what he has got in his locker, but it just feels very unlikely that he will produce that. So just one thing, it's not me tipping him, but it's a bit of a be wary of him, because initially he was the first name that jumped out to me, that 4 million seems good. But then when I looked into the numbers, I don't watch that much La Liga, and I knew that he wasn't performing well, but I really didn't know that he'd only played 3 games this season. So yeah, it feels very unlikely that he'll perform, but he does looking at their previous games, he does look like he's going to start. You've got Kevin De Bruyne at 7 million, and this was a weird one because he's a must-have in Dream Team, like the normal Dream Team, but in international football, I'm less confident that he sort of lives up to that 7 million price point. He doesn't have Haaland to assist, he hasn't got even Lukaku in this team to assist. He's actually going to have Michy Batshuayi probably starting up front. With Hazard on the other wing, I'm really doubting whether he's going to have the assist potential that he normally does. But the only thing that I would say is he's going to be the main performer in that team. If he's in a front three or in that attacking role with Hazard and Batshuayi and players like that, I do think that he's probably going to be the standout performer, and then could get star man quite often. But at 7 million and not playing at Man City, it just feels a little bit expensive. One player though for Belgium that I do think could be a good pick is Castane, that plays for Leicester. He's 3 million, and I think even though Belgium aren't looking as good as they have done previously, Canada and Morocco, those two first fixtures, if you could have Castane for 3 million, I do still think there's a good chance they could get a clean sheet, and he is a really attacking defender, so there's a chance that he could get assists or goals as well. So I think he's a great budget pick at 3 million. And they obviously should be favourites for their group, even though I think Croatia might actually get first place. When I look back at the fixtures, or the previous results, they had a warm-up game against Egypt and they did lose 2-1, but Castane got a 7 rating in that game, and then before that, their last competitive fixture, they actually lost again against Holland, so maybe it's not looking good for the clean sheets. But he started that game as well, and he played at left wing back in that one. So it does look like there's a good chance that he'll definitely start this one, either on the right wing back position or left wing back. Then this last one's in sort of punt territory, but Batshuayi, if Lukaku is injured and ruled out for a lot of the competition, at 3 million as the starting striker for Belgium, no matter how sort of prolific he is, I think at 3 million, that is quite a good option in that Belgian side, who should dispatch of Canada and Morocco fairly easily. So yeah, just 3 million starting and having De Bruyne putting balls in and Castane on the wings, I still think there's a good chance that he could sort of be a gem or a bit of a punty pick that could perform for the price. Then moving on to Brazil, who I have actually tipped as winning the tournament outright, which is a little bit surprising because when you see my team, I haven't got that many Brazil players at the minute, but it's mostly because I'm not 100% certain on how they're going to line up. But the one person that I know is obviously going to start is Neymar, and he's 7 million. I think that's a pretty reasonable price for Brazil's star man. I think I'll definitely be bringing him in ahead of that Cameroon game, definitely. But depending on how they start off, I could bring him in for Switzerland as well. I don't think I'll have him for the first fixture against Serbia, but he's definitely someone who I'm going to look to target. They've got a lot of options, Brazil, in that front three, and loads of rotation, but the only person that you know isn't going to be rotated is Neymar. Wherever he plays, he is going to play, so I think he's the best option from Brazil, hands down. The other positions for Brazil, though, I find are a bit more tricky. At centre-back, it's probably going to be Marquinhos and Thiago Silva, but both are 5.5 million. And although I think that Brazil are going to go all the way, I think in the group stages, there's clean sheets to be had in some of the other teams. So these could be people that you look to bring in maybe for the groups, for the knockout stages, if you do think they're going to win the competition. But at 5.5 million, I think they're a bit too expensive, and with there being no price increases throughout the tournament, the only thing you need to watch out is that you don't use all your transfers. But if Thiago Silva and Marquinhos do start really well, and it looks like they're nailed on starters, there's no reason why you can't bring them in for the same 5.5 million. So for me, I think I'm going to look to bring these in a bit later on if they are going deep in the competition. On the other hand, though, Telles and Danilo, they're looking like they're going to be the two starting fullbacks, and they're only 3.5 million. So they seem quite a bargain in comparison. If Brazil are keeping clean sheets, there's a chance that these guys are going to too. And they're 2 million cheaper than Thiago Silva and Marquinhos. So I'll wait and see the lineups, but these two look good value. I've mentioned the rotation in the front three, and I think the position to fight for is going to be that striker role. I think it's going to be between Richarlison and Gabriel Jesus. Richarlison, they're both 5.5, but Richarlison actually has 3 goals in his last 2 and was looking good for Brazil. But he has only just come back from injury with Spurs, so I'm not 100% sure who's going to get that starting role. But what I'll do is I'll wait and see what the the starting lineups are going to be for this game before I look to bring anyone in. One person that I'm sure I'm going to include in some of my teams though is Paqueta from West Ham. He's only 4 million for Brazil, and I was looking and he seems like a nailed on starter for them. He's started 6 of the last 6 games for Brazil, so I'm pretty sure he's nailed on. He seems to sort of play anywhere in that sort of midfield position or at number 10. So I really would consider him nailed, playing 6 in 6. Not many international players have done that throughout the fixtures when I looked through, but the only downside of this is he was substituted in all 6 of them, and with 5 substitutes in this tournament, it's a pretty good chance he's going to get subbed off again. So if you are putting him in your team, there is a slight risk that he could get taken off before he can get that 7 rating, but he does seem like he chips in with assists and goals now and again, so to get a nailed sort of midfielder in there for Brazil, I think he's a good one to consider. Then we go to Uruguay. So they play Korea first, they've got a tough game against Portugal second, and then they've got Ghana in the last game, who haven't been doing very well lately. So I think that could be a good fixture to target, and that first game against Korea. But the Portugal one, I think that's going to be a really tight game. But looking at Uruguay squad, I was actually impressed with. They've got a lot of key players that you recognise, but the only thing is, not all of them have really delivered at international level. So you've got obviously Darwin Núñez, who's at Liverpool, but I was surprised to actually see, so he's 5 million on the game, but he's actually only got 1 goal in qualifying, and only started 3. And when I dug into that further, he's actually only played 13 times for Uruguay, so I was quite surprised with that one. So we don't have much data to go on for his sort of performances for Uruguay, but from his season at Liverpool so far, I think he's going to be dangerous, and he looks like he's going to start up front with Luis Suarez. So that's going to be a good combo, those two up front, Darwin Núñez and Luis Suarez. He got 8 goals in qualifying, and he only got, but he did only get 1 in the last Copa America. But I think out of the two, Darwin Núñez looks a better option. Then you've got Valverde as well, who's 4.5 million, who plays for Real Madrid. And he's actually got 9 goals this season for Madrid, which is quite good for the position that he does play. But I'm not quite sure if he plays the exact same role as he does for Madrid for this Uruguay side. It looks like he plays in the midfield too. And he could be playing with Bentancur from Spurs, it looks like, if this is SofaScore, but yeah, this was their last game. I think it was a warm-up game or a friendly against Canada. And Darwin Núñez actually scored in this one, but it looks like the midfield 2 is Valverde and Bentancur. But he could be worth picking, but 4.5 does seem a little bit high for a team that we're not sure how they're going to perform, and someone that hasn't really done it so far for Uruguay. He's got 4 goals for Uruguay so far. So it's not looking likely that he'll sort of hit the same figures that he does for Real Madrid. Then last but not least, on to Portugal. So again, they're in the same group as Uruguay, but they've got Ghana in the first game, which could be a really good one to target. Then they've got Uruguay in the second game and Korea in the third game. Looking at their starting lineup, actually, the Portugal team looks really strong. It's just whether or not they deliver. But yeah, front to back, they've got quality in all positions. But actually, this is probably one of the not very many few bargains in this World Cup game. But Bruno Fernandes, only 4.5 million. I think he could be quite underpriced on this. He got 2 goals in the last warm-up game where they won 4-0 against Nigeria. So I think he could be a really good pick. Depending on how Ronaldo performs as well, because there's a lot of controversy around him, but Bruno does seem to step up. And then the main man, Ronaldo, so he's 7 million, and I think I'm going to use him in the same sort of plan who I've mentioned with Neymar, Kane, Messi, and I think I still will consider bringing him in ahead of this Ghana game. And then what I'm going to do is try and use some transfers to target the big hitters when they play the weaker sides. So I think he's a great option, but we're probably going to have to wait and see where his head's at the start of the tournament. I expect he's going to start, but that Ghana game or the Korea game could definitely be worth attacking, even with everything going on in his sort of not so private life. I don't think he can ever sort of bet against Ronaldo, and now it seems like it's all over with Man United. I think he's going to be looking to prove a point in this tournament and then potentially prove himself for getting a move after Man U. Then another player that's performing really well in the standard dream team is Diego Dalot, and he's only 3.5 million on this. He's had a great season at Man United so far. Seems to get a lot of sort of star man and 7 ratings. It might be quite difficult being in the same team as Bruno and Ronaldo, but I still think he'll quite regularly get 7 ratings, and he's got that assist potential too. Looking at it as well, he's one of the cheaper options in the back line. You have got Cancelo and Ruben Diaz, but again, I think Cancelo and Diaz both seem quite overpriced. In the Man City team, with that solid back line, they look good value normally. But in this Portugal team, I don't think it's quite the same. So I think Dalot's well worth a pick on this one. Then lastly, I'm just going to show you my team that I'm going to be documenting throughout the tournament. I am going to make the full allocation of teams, so I'm going to have quite a few different versions of teams to try and see how I can climb up the rankings and maybe even win the cash prize at the end. But this is the team that I'm going to document throughout the tournament. There might be a few changes nearer the time in case there's any leaks or lineups come out, but this is what I'm going to go with so far. So Emi Martinez in goal. Like I said, those Argentina fixtures I think are really good, and I think it's just a bit easier to predict Martinez in goal than potentially some of the other defenders from Argentina. So I'm going to start with him in goal, and then actually I'm going to go with the double Martinez. So I'm going to have Lisandro Martinez from Man United and also Argentina. I'm going to have him in the back line, and I'm really going to go for that. I'm not going to go for the full block, but I'm going to go for a bit of a double up. So I'm going to go with Argentina and target their fairly easy fixtures. And then I'm going to have 2 players from England as well. So Kieran Trippier and Harry Maguire, who I spoke about recently. I think England have potential to keep clean sheets in 2 or even 3 of their games, touch wood. But I think, again, Maguire hasn't been doing it in the normal season, but I still think he's suited to international football. And Kieran Trippier has just been too good throughout normal dream team to ignore him. Then Nathan Ake, who obviously I mentioned him a bit earlier on in one of my tips, but I just think in that back line from Holland, I think Virgil van Dijk's too expensive, and I would like to have Dumfries. I'm just not 100% sure that he starts that first game, so I'm going to go with Ake to start with, and then if Dumfries comes back, I could potentially upgrade him later on. But Senegal, Ecuador and Qatar, there's some really good fixtures, and I actually wouldn't be surprised. I won't do it in this team, but in one of my other teams, I'm pretty sure I'm going to probably flood that with a few 2 or even maybe 3 Dutch defenders, because I think they've got some real good clean sheet potentials with those fixtures. So yeah, in the back line, England, Argentina and Holland. I might look to change these around. Like I said, I do want Brazil, and I probably do want some France players in there as well, but I'm not as sure who starts for those teams at the minute, so I'll wait and see the first lineups. And also, I think with these teams, England, Argentina and Holland, they all have their first fixture quite early on, so you could bank the clean sheets for these guys, hopefully, and then potentially move on to the other ones once you see the lineups. Then I've got a 3-man midfield, so I'm playing 4-3-3. I've got Paqueta, Perisic and Højbjerg, who actually I haven't mentioned in the rest of this video, but I'm least convinced actually about the midfield options as a whole. I may even look to upgrade one of these 4 million slots to Bruno Fernandes, because I think I actually convinced myself a little bit more while I was doing this video that he's going to be a good pick. But yeah, Paqueta, Perisic, Højbjerg. So we start with Paqueta. Like I said, he's a nailed midfielder, and I do think that Brazil are going to score a lot of goals, and there's a good chance that he could be the assister or even contributing with goals for that. And at 4 million, I think he's quite reasonably priced. And again, Perisic, goals, assists, I think he's got really good potential. I think maybe 4 million, he could be a bit overpriced, but he's going to be playing really advanced for them, so I quite like him as an option too. Højbjerg, I could end up changing this one, but I think that they will qualify through this group, And looking back at the previous results, they've had some really impressive results lately. And Højbjerg's one of these players that's going to play 90 minutes of every game, and his performances for Spurs this season have been really good. And one thing I've seen this season from him, which I think he did quite regularly for Denmark, but not so much for Spurs previously, is that he does play a more advanced role for these guys, and he's chipping in with goals and assists now. So I think he could be an option, and he's quite a cheaper player. So I just want to have one player that I know that's going to play every fixture and play 90 minutes of each one, and I think he could just tick along with the 7 ratings as well. So any attacking returns is going to be a bonus. Then Messi, Kane, I don't think I need to really explain these ones that much, both 7.5, but like I said, I think these two positions I'm going to look to rotate throughout the group stages, allocate myself a number of transfers to use, but I think I'm going to rotate and attack the fixtures that look the best. So Kane and Messi could quite easily rotate to Benzema when France play Australia, Ronaldo when Portugal play Ghana, or even like Neymar when Brazil play Cameroon. And then if I want them back for the knockouts or later on, I can just make that transfer back. But these 7.5 million slots, I think, have got the best haul potential overall. Then the last player I've got is Cody Gakpo at 4 million. Now I'm going to start with this, but again, I'm not entirely convinced. He's got really good goal and assist potential, but I'm still not convinced he's the best option. And again, I could play a 4-4-2 and maybe upgrade him to Bruno Fernandes, but I think with Holland having some good early fixtures, I think I'm going to chuck him in first and see how he gets on in potentially that first 1 or 2 games. I'm going to leave it there for that episode. Thank you for watching, and apologies if the quality wasn't as good as my usual videos where I'm in a hotel room at the minute. I'll be back tomorrow actually, but I just wanted to get this video out before the start of the World Cup. So if you did enjoy the video and you've taken anything valuable from it, please do like and subscribe, and hopefully you should see some better quality content for the rest of the tournament. Thanks for watching.